All right, so we got the RF lens. You've got Irene's EF lens there ready to go. I think we're ready to shoot.
Yeah, but when's the model show up? I mean, there's a portrait lens.
Chris, one day you're going to realize that the perfect model was right there under your eyes the entire time.
Just don't make me do this.
Blow, blow. Oh, beautiful. Yes, yes.
No, no kisses. Don't blow kisses. No, it's terrible. Welcome back, DPReview TV viewers. Chris Nichols here. Today we're going to be playing with the Canon RF 85mm 1.2. We're doing this because we've talked up our lenses for a long time, and it occurs to us that we've never actually reviewed one. So I thought we would change that today. And the 85mm 1.2 is a very unique, very fun lens, specialized for portraiture. And we thought we'd put a little bit of a twist on it because you see, this is not Canon's first 85mm 1.2. They made these lenses for the EF mount. They actually made two different versions. So what we thought we'd do is try to play with not only the RF mount, but an original Canon EF 85mm 1.2. And a good friend of ours, incredibly talented portrait photographer, local here to Calgary, Irene Rudnyk, shoots the EF 85mm 1.2 a lot. In fact, a lot of her early work is almost exclusively on her lens. And so she was gracious enough to let us borrow it. We're taking really good care of it. And we thought we'd see a sort of side by side today, how far this lens has come. And of course, remember that we can mount this with the EF to R adapter on the Canon EOS R. So you're gonna see side by side of these two lenses on the same body today. Now, the original Canon EF 85mm 1.2 was often described as a bowling ball, and rightfully so. It was just over 1,000 grams. That's half a noct for those that prefer that. It's about 4.68 billion pounds in the imperial system. Yet moving to the RF mount lens, it's now just under 1,200 grams. So, you know, almost 20% heavier than the original lens, and very front heavy, which on an EOS R definitely does feel a little weird. Now, the Canon EOS R5 might be a nice option for this lens to balance things out. Although we don't know the official weight of it, it looks like it'll have a battery grip option, and that might make things a little bit more comfortable to use, although that whole package is going to be quite bulky and quite heavy. I personally don't mind holding this with the EOS R just in one hand and balancing it that way, but it is a lot of weight to have there in the arms, I will say that. The Canon RF 85mm is also physically quite a bit larger as well. It's got an 82mm filter thread on here. It's physically quite a bit longer than the old EF lens, bigger hood as well. I do like that we have a customizable control ring with clicks. That's very, very nice. And the manual focus here is definitely smoother than the original 85 as well. So we tried to find the most disgusting wall that we could nearby, just to show you a quick point here. Why we love wide aperture portrait lenses, and the 85 1.2 is to the extreme a wide aperture portrait lens. Shooting at 5.6, which is pretty classic on a kit lens, for example, looking at a shot like this, you can see that we can get the background out of focus, but it's still very distracting and kind of yucky looking. Shooting at 85mm at 1.2, you can totally just wipe that into soft blur, and that is really one of the nice benefits of this lens. Do notice though also that trying to get both eyes in focus is very tricky with that shallow depth of field, so be very careful of trying to get people exactly parallel both eyes to the sensor plane, or make use of that thin depth of field and just let things go wild. So in shooting portraiture, it's quite popular to use a bright light source or the sun behind your subject to get some of that backlighting and even have some fun with a little bit of flare. So I thought we'd test that with these two lenses. The first thing to keep in mind is we are testing the original EF 85mm 1.2L lens, not the second version, which actually had better coatings to try to minimize some of the flare. When you look at it side by side, you can see that the RF mount lens, very clean. I mean, beautiful, even wide open. We do get a little bit of flare, but we really got to try for it. Whereas on the original EF lens, you're going to see that flare is very prevalent. That might be something that changes the deciding factor for you. However, I do want you to keep in mind that even Irene herself said, sometimes it's nice to have that flare. It can give you a very creative look, and certainly the 85mm is going to have a lot of character in that regard when you're looking at the EF mount. Now, of course, when it comes to lenses, we love to test LOCA, longitudinal chromatic aberration, because it's hard to fix. And this is basically the small color shift that you might see in foreground versus background objects that are all out of focus. But when we look at the RF 85mm, it's no contest. This thing is basically virtually chromatic aberration free, even wide open. Probably thanks to the BR elements that they've incorporated in there. It's just not going to be an issue, and that's always a nice thing. Shallow depth of field can make even the most common dandelion beautiful, and I really just wanted to kind of see what the fall off looked like. It looks almost identical in both lenses, but also the minimum focusing distance. And as you can see in the two examples, we have a very slight difference. You know, the 85mm RF 1.2 can focus down to 850 millimeters, and the 85mm EF 1.2 can focus down to 950 millimeters. In practical terms, not really a major difference at all. One of the major issues on the older 85mm 1.2 was its abysmal focusing speed. And even though Canon claimed that they improved it by 1.8 times with the second version, it was really brutal. I mean, in the studio, you might get away with autofocusing speeds like that, but for street photography or candid shots, forget it. Now, the RF 85mm, I would not describe as a fast focusing lens, but it's worlds above the old 85mm on the EF. Now, another major issue that photographers faced when using the old 85mm 1.2 was just that incredibly shallow depth of field. It was very hard to get accurate focus, especially on the eyes where you wanted it. The manual focus didn't help you out. It was an early focus by wire system. It was very difficult to use. And of course, SLRs do traditionally sometimes have focusing issues and need micro adjustments. And if you're not quite there, you're going to get a lot of eyelashes or, you know, back of the eye in focus, but not the iris where you want it. So, you know, the RF lens avoids all this because using it on a modern Canon EOS R body, I don't have that problem. I get face detect, eye detect, it's nice and fast focusing, it goes right to it. However, I should mention that using the old EF lens with the adapter on the EOS R, I'm getting the same face and eye detect capabilities, and it's focusing beautifully, albeit again, quite slowly. Now, in the new RF lens, what you'll find, wide open, little bit of cat's eye in the corners, absolutely, but otherwise beautiful rendering of out of focus areas. These lenses are made to really showcase shallow depth of field well. Now, as you stop the lens down, things do stay fairly circular on the apertures. You do notice a bit of a bright edge though as you start to stop down, but overall, again, pleasing bokeh whether you're shooting wide open or stop down. Now, for even just a few $100s more, you can look at the DS variant of this lens. DS stands for defocus smoothing, has special coatings on some of the inner elements to smooth out that bokeh even more so and just give you the most buttery kind of look possible. But we didn't have that lens to test, and you know, really on the downside, it does cost you up to a stop and a half of light using this lens, and you don't quite get that same super shallow look that the standard 1.2 lens gives you. And I think a lot of people are looking for that. The bokeh is already so beautiful on the standard version. I think it'd be making a specialized lens even way more specialized to get that DS variant. Now, both these lenses in their day were considered incredibly sharp, but we got to remember that the older EF85's day was the end of the 80s. You definitely see some differences between the two. The RF lens at 1.2 wide open, fantastic, incredibly sharp, even right to the corners. By the time you stop down to F2, it's basically as sharp and as perfect as you're going to want it to be, and I have no doubt it's going to work very well on the EOS R5 as well.
Jordan here to talk about video while Chris films me on a Canon EOS R on an 85 right at 1.2. Now he's on the other side of the parking lot because of the 1.7 crop factor on this body. Obviously, it's a very sharp lens, and the new autofocus system that they've got on there means it's actually going to be quite usable for video. So you can see there is quite a bit of focus breathing. This isn't something that Canon has addressed with this lens. There are some other improvements though. I do love having the extra control ring though. Unfortunately, it is clicky, so you're not going to get smooth exposure control with it. But the manual focus ring, even though it's focused by wire, it is still pretty responsive. Again, if it weren't for that breathing, I'd be pretty comfortable pulling focus with this lens. The real issue is this is an RF lens, and right now there are no cameras recording a full frame image that is actually going to take advantage of that. When the R5 shows up, we'll hopefully get that, but it is a real letdown that the C500 II had an EF mount instead of an RF mount, but in the future, this will be in a lot of video shooters' arsenal, I think.
I had a lot of fun today kind of testing the old versus the new, and I think the first takeaway that we can see, the new RF 85mm lens is basically near perfect. I mean, it's a technical masterpiece. There's no real compromises except it's heavy, it is bulky, and it is very expensive, absolutely. But I also was interested to see that the old Canon EF 85mm 1.2, although having issues like flare and more chromatic aberrations, still gave me that niche kind of portrait look that's the whole reason for buying a lens like this. It could be a very interesting lens that you could get used for a very good price, and that might be something you want to do. Although keep in mind that things like the slow autofocus motor are still going to limit it to basically static portrait situations. Where the RF lens shines though is just that it's so incredible optically, as we've talked about. And with that faster autofocusing motor, I could see it being more useful for not only studio portraits, but also candid portraits on the street, wedding photography, journalism, you know, shots where you might have to respond a little bit quicker. The RF lens will deliver that. As well, if you are looking to take advantage of the newer sensors, I think the RF lens is really going to be your only choice. Hope you guys found this review useful. Please let us know in the comments below what you think. Check out Instagram and Twitter. Go to DPReview.com. You'll see sample galleries for these lenses, not only for the standard RF 85mm 1.2, but also the new defocus smoothing version, so you can see if that difference is something that you want to spend the extra coin for. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you guys soon.